To use the large anticlastic former to make an anticlastic cuff, first, make sure that your urethane holder is inserted into the ram and that there's one washer placed on it. This takes up some extra slack and allows the urethane to reach the bottom, the deepest portion of the former. Then mount the large anticlastic former to the fourth hole in the tool mounting plate. We recommend using non-ferrous metal that is about 1 inch wide and around 16 gauge to 24 gauge. This is annealed metal, and it will give you the most defined curve, but you can also use hard metal as well. The curve just won't be as defined. To use the large synclastic former, you want to line up your metal with the groove in the former itself. The forming area is 1 inch wide, so you want to make sure that your metal is no wider than that and that it's parallel to the former, not angled forward or backward. So then insert your metal so that the end of the strip is about in the center of the former. You want to form the end first. Then when your metal is in place, make sure that the strip coming out is parallel, and then you will press the handle down. And this gives you the first curve of the anticlastic form. So this is 16 gauge metal, and it's already forming really nicely. So we'll put the metal back in and then scoot it forward about 1/8 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch. You want to take small little steps to get the smoothest curve. This is where we formed the end of the strip, and I'm just going to scoot it forward a little bit, press the handle down again, scoot it forward a little, press it again, and we will continue to do that, taking these little tiny shifts forward. Okay, let's take a look. Pretty quickly, we formed a nice, deep anticlastic curve. The small steps that I took give you this nice, smooth, even curve without any flat areas or points. This is exactly what you're looking for when you're using the large anticlastic former. On this end of the strip, I'm going to show you what it looks like when you take too big of steps. So we'll form the end of the strip just as we did before. Get that nice anticlastic curve going. And then instead of scooting it forward just a little bit, I'm going to scoot it forward 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. We'll press again. Scoot it forward more than we should. This is what not to do. Scoot it forward more than we should. Scoot it forward more than we should. Okay, and now let's take a peek. There is a clear difference in the side where I took the smaller steps versus the side where I took steps that were 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch. These are too large of steps. You get these ridges and ripples along the edge. So that is a really clear example of why you want to take 1/4 inch, 1/16 inch, little tiny steps forward rather than trying to go faster and take bigger steps. You can fix this though. We will just put it back into the press and start taking smaller steps. And this will smooth out those bumpy, scalloped edges. You can also form over the same areas more than once. So if something's not looking right, go ahead, go back and forth until you achieve the form you want. You can see here, I must not have been feeding it in perfectly straight because the ends don't perfectly line up. An easy way to adjust that is to get the top section exactly where you want it, and downward pressure with the urethane, and then use your fingers to just pull the end that's out of alignment toward you. And you can continue to refine the form as needed. So that is not too bad. This is a nice even forming using the large Anticlastic former will give you. Now to open it up a little bit and give the cuff space to be put onto the wrist, all you'll do is you'll place 2 fingers from each hand on either side of the split in the cuff, and then you just pull slightly outward. This gives you more of an oval shape. You can go back in if you want to, like say this area seems a little flat still. I could put that back in and form it a little bit more. We'll pull that back out. So you can make minor adjustments, but by just pulling open those ends a little bit, it creates a nice cuff. Here's how the large synclastic former works when you use full hard metal. So this is the same metal that I used before. It's 16 gauge, except it's not annealed. So I will press it. We'll press it a few times to give you a good example. Taking little steps forward. Okay, and let's take a look. You can see it is forming it. You are getting the curve in this direction as well as the curve in this direction. It's just not as defined. The walls don't come up as much as they do in the annealed metal, and it takes a little bit more effort to use. But if you really want a strong, sturdy bracelet, you can definitely use hard metal. This blank is wider than what's recommended. So we recommend 1 inch or narrower strip. This is closer to 1.5 inches or maybe 1.25 inches. It is possible, but you see these flat areas on the former? The metal will become marred because it will be overhanging these flat edges. You can see on the back of this piece, there are marks. But if that doesn't bother you or you're fine with removing those later, let me show you how to do it. So we'll start off the same way as we did before, just centering our metal and taking little tiny steps. And right about here is the 1 inch point where the metal fully fits within the recess. Beyond this, we're going to have to rotate our metal sort of this direction and then this direction within that groove. And you'll work back and forth to create the anticlastic shape. So we'll do this, and then I'm rotating the metal toward me a little bit, the front edge. We'll press it, rotate it back a little bit, and then I'm going to scoot forward. Again, do the same thing. I'm sort of rocking it back and forth, pressing it in between. This will be slightly harder to keep even, but you will be able to use slightly wider material than the 1 inch. This is probably as wide as you'd want to go. And you can see it's not curving as tightly as the smaller width metal, but it is still curving. So let me do a little bit more and I will show you what it looks like. And I'll show you the back as well, because it does get marred. Okay, well, let's take a peek. At about this point, this is about the 1 inch mark, where it's about approximately 1 inch wide. So this section here, I just formed as usual. This section from here to here, I rocked the metal back and forth in between pressings. And the entire width is formed. It just takes a few more pressings. And it'll take a little bit of refining because it does tend to want to get a little off center. You'll just have to finesse it a little bit, but it is possible. Here's the cuff that I made that was wider than 1 inch. And it took a lot of back and forth. I did need to anneal it again, but you can see how deep this groove is. I worked it back and forth, rotating it this way as I was forming it. I did need to at certain points. Let's see if I can show you. So you can press down with the urethane, press down with the handle to hold this in place, and then use your hand to push the metal around the former. This can also help tighten things up. So I did need to do that a couple of times. And it could still use some refining. You can see the marks on the inside, these linear marks. Those would need to be removed. But if you do have metal that's just slightly larger than 1 inch wide, you can absolutely make a cuff using the quick form press and the large Anticlastic former.